So how much does it take to be in the top 20% and top 10% of income earners in Singapore? Does this mean that the median household income cannot afford a private property? Are they telling us that housing is no longer affordable? Let's break it down. $141 million HDB flats were sold just in April alone. That's right, an all-time high of 141 units. So this naturally begs the question, is housing still affordable in Singapore? Million-dollar HDBs aren't new, but the speed at which that they are popping up is surprising. Since 2012, the number of these transactions have been rising, not slowly but exponentially. If we continue at this pace of 141 units transacted in a month, we're looking at about $1,692 million HDB flats transacted by the end of 2025. That's a 63% jump from last year's record of 1,035 units. So the numbers are pretty wild, but are they telling us that housing is no longer affordable? To answer that, let's try to look at what affordability really means. So how would you measure affordability? So the government measures it using the median price to income ratio, something that they keep a close eye on. It compares the median price of the home to what the median household earns. For resale HDB flats, the government has decided to keep this ratio under 5. But in 2023, it went up to 5.3, which prompted cooling measures such as reducing the HDB loan-to-value limit from 80% to 75% in August of 2024. And that had an impact. By the end of 2024, the ratio dropped to 3.4. So using this as a benchmark for affordability, we can argue that HDBs are still relatively affordable. But what about private properties? That's where things start to look very different. For the medium-income household, price-to-income ratios for new launch condos jumped during COVID, from an average of 10 to even higher. On the other hand, resale condos actually saw a drop from around 15. Still, both are well above the benchmark for resale HDBs of 5, which raises concerns about affordability. But does this mean that the median household income cannot afford a private property? If we zoom out and look at the long-term trend since 2000, affordability has fluctuated for median income households. Price-to-income ratios have hovered around 17 for both new and resale condos. But here's what's interesting. Over time, resale condos have slowly become more affordable for the median household. That's a good sign. However, here's a key point. Roughly 80% of Singapore households live in HDB flats, which means that the remaining 22% live in some form of private property. This means that private housing is really designed for the top 20% of income earners. For them, when we look at the longer period of time, affordability hasn't changed much. Both new and resale condos stay around a ratio of 7 for the top 20% and around 5 for the top 10% of income earners. So for this group, affordability has remained rather stable. It's the median income group that has seen the most fluctuation, which could have contributed to on-ground sentiments on unaffordability. However, even for the median income groups, resale condos have become more reachable across time. So how much does it take to be in the top 20% and top 10% of income earners in Singapore? While the median income household earns about $11,500 a month, to be in the top 20%, a household needs to bring in around $24,200 a month. And for the top 10%, roughly $34,500 a month. This implies that resale HDB flats catering to the median income household should not exceed $687,000 for it to be considered affordable. Since the median price to income ratio has to be below 5 for the government to consider it as affordable. It also means that homeowners owning a HDB flat with this valuation or less should easily find a potential buyer, as long as the home has decent locational attributes and layout. On the other hand, private properties, which make up about 20% of the housing supply, would generally be catered to homeowners in the top 20%. Theoretically, this means that the minimum income needed for a household to own a private property is roughly $291,000. However, as there are smaller sized private properties such as the one-bedroom units and executive condominiums available, households outside of the top 20% of income earners can still get on the private property ladder. But for how long? So perhaps one reason that people feel that housing is unaffordable is because of the gap between what they expect to consume in the housing market and what they can actually purchase, given what their current income can support. Another theory to support claims of a lack of affordability could be that we are just spending too much of our income compared to past generations. After all, there are more ways to be spending our income and things have generally gotten more expensive. But when you look at the personal saving rates for Singaporean households from 2000 to 2024, it tells a different story. The savings rate has actually gone up. from around 20% to over 35% today. So even as incomes have continued to increase, people are also able to save a larger proportion of their income today than compared to past generations. Another factor to consider is changes in government regulation, in particular, loan limits. Loan limits, among other government regulations, have also changed with time. In the early 2000s, buyers could still take a minimum of 90% loan-to-value ratio, but with multiple rounds of cooling measures across time, this limit has been reduced to 75% today. Other changes to government regulations, such as the introduction of the minimum cash component for private properties and tweaks in the buyer's stamp duty regimes, have also resulted in a higher cash amount upfront required for financing certain housing types. Therefore, this means that buyers today have to fork out a larger percentage of their down payment compared to past generations. This could be one culprit affecting the perception of affordability today. So is housing still affordable in Singapore? One thing that I've learned from this exercise is that affordability is also subjective. People have different expectations of the type of housing that they want to consume in the market versus what their income bracket can support. Others might also feel unhappy given the amount of down payment they will need to put down for their homes. By using the government's indicator of comparing price to income ratios, I have to agree that both public and private housing have remained rather affordable, given that these ratios have been rather consistent across time for the respective income brackets. If this continues to hold, we'll likely see more million-dollar HDB flats in the coming years ahead. But don't mistake this for a bubble. Incomes are strong and buyers are still entering the market. So unless we are saying that housing has always been unaffordable, which doesn't quite add up, it's reasonable to conclude that the system still works for most people. However, there are definitely groups within society that feel the stretch more than others. Singles, divorcees, widowers, or households with a single income, and many dependents are some examples. These groups don't necessarily fit the typical dual income household type and may struggle to find something suitable, especially if they need more space. The government will also have to keep an eye on these gaps while also balancing their goal of attracting more individuals to start their family here in Singapore. See you in the next one.